Good morning and welcome to the Public Service Commission of South Carolina. It is Wednesday, January 24th at 10:01 a.m. and we are here today for hearing in docket number 2023-156-A. Let's take a roll call of commissioners. With us virtually we have Commissioner Irvin. Present in the hearing room we have Commissioner Justin Williams, Vice Chair Powers, Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Carolee Williams, Commissioner Caston, and Chair Belser. I'm going to ask our staff attorney, Ms. Clausen, to read the docket, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today is January the 24th, 2024. We're here in docket number 2023-156-A, review of Chapter 103, Article 2, Motor Carriers, South Carolina Code of State Regulations.
Thank you, Ms. Clausen. As stated by our staff counsel, this is a review of regulations that is, this hearing is being conducted pursuant to the Administrative Procedures Act and the promulgation of regulations. Let's take appearances from participants. Office of Regulatory Staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ben Mustian on behalf of ORS.
Thank you, Mr. Mustian. Do we have any virtual participants this morning? No virtual participants. Ms. Boyd?
Good morning, Chair Belser, members of the Commission.
Ms. Boyd, for the record, would you identify yourself, please?
Sure. I'm the Chief Clerk, Executive Director at the Public Service Commission.
Thank you, ma'am.
Chair Belser, before I start with the slide deck and a summary of the proposed changes that were filed in our proposed regulation, the Commission staff's proposed regulation, I'd like to ask you to consider to place certain jurisdictional dockets or make them a part of the record.
Yes, ma'am. Let's go ahead and get the jurisdictional documents as part of the record, please.
Okay, we'll begin with the notice of drafting, and Ms. Adams is helping this morning to distribute the documents that I refer to. The first is the notice of drafting, Chair Belser, and you will notice on the top page that this notice of drafting was filed with the Legislative Council on May 12th, 2023. We'd ask that you make that a part of the record, please.
Ms. Adams, I'm going to ask that you also make sure that ORS gets a copy, if you would. Thank you.
The first hearing exhibit, please, ma'am.
This document is it's 3 pages.
Yes, ma'am.
The first page indicates that it's a notice of drafting with the filed stamp from the Legislative Council. The second page was the original filing that presumably with a copy of the notice, which was actually filed. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We will mark the notice of drafting of 3 pages, mark that for identification as hearing exhibit number 1, and admit it into the evidence of this case.
Chair Belser, for the second exhibit, we'd like for you to consider making a part of the record. It is the proposed regulation. You'll notice that the official filing stamp at the bottom right-hand corner indicates that this document was filed with the Legislative Council on October 13th, 2023.
The proposed regulation filed with Legislative Council on October 13th will be marked for identification as hearing exhibit number 2 and received in the evidence of this case.
The next document, Chair Belser, we'd ask that you make the include as part of the record and as an exhibit is the actual copy of the notice of drafting that was published in volume 47, issue 5, on May 26, 2023 in the South Carolina State Register.
Mr. Mustian, I expect if you have any issue to raise an objection, just speak up.
Yes, ma'am. No issues.
The drafting notice as appeared in the State Register on May 26, 2023, volume 47, issue number 5, will be marked as hearing exhibit number 3 and received into the evidence of this case.
Thank you, Chair Belser. The next document, there are two documents, two separate documents. One is a copy of the proposed regulation published in the South Carolina State Register in volume 47, issue 10 on October 27th, 2023. And then Ms. Adams is also distributing the document that appears in the link. So it's a copy of the entire proposed regulation. We'd ask that you please mark these as the next hearing exhibit and enter them into the evidence record of this case.
Can this be a composite exhibit?
Please, yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Hearing exhibit number 5 will be the proposed regulation as published in the South Carolina State Register on October 27, 2023 in volume 47, issue number 10, along with the document that was accessible via the link in the notice to the public. Is that number 4? Yes. Okay, sorry. Number 4, marked for identification is hearing exhibit number 4.
Finally, Chair Belser.
And received into the evidence of this case. Thank you.
Finally, Chair Belser, Ms. Adams is distributing the last document. It's a verification of the proposed regulation that was filed with the Legislative Council on October 19th. If you would please.
It just takes a second to get down to me.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. The verification of the proposed regulation looks like it's about 67 pages.
Yes, ma'am.
Will be marked for identification as hearing exhibit number 5 and received into the evidence of this case. Is that it?
That's it. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Chair Belser, staff, as you're aware, conducted workshops for members of the public to attend and to provide comments regarding the Commission's existing regulations. And my slide deck does not include, it does, in some of the summaries for the proposed changes to the regulations reference Act number 214 of 2022. Many of the changes that are included in the proposed regulation are intended to reflect the impact that Act 214 of 2022 has on the Commission's jurisdiction over motor vehicle carriers. And so I just wanted to make that statement prior to beginning the presentation on this regarding our slide deck this morning.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Brown, thank you. Okay, thank you. Ms. Adams, have you distributed the slide deck? Oh, okay, thank you. All right. So, Chair Belser, you've been through this process numerous times within the last year, not this year, but also last year, reference to the code section, which requires each state agency to review its regulations every 5 years. And so the first slide just references that statute. The next slide,
Ms. Boyd.
Yes, ma'am.
I apologize for interrupting. Is that microphone on?
Yes.
Okay.
The reason that I'm standing back like this is because the production team, oftentimes I would speak too loudly,
Okay.
and I'm about to,
All
my
right.
sound
I
is
just
annoying.
I have a air vent that I'm hearing over here.
Oh.
And so I can
Okay.
barely hear you. So
Okay.
Can you hear?
Is that okay? Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
I'll balance it. I don't
Thank
want to
you.
burst their eardrums.
I understand.
So, we just reviewed the information on slide 3, and that's regarding the publication of the notice of drafting and the proposed regulation in the state register. Now, the next couple of pages contain list of the regulations that were impacted in the proposed regulation document. Okay, so we're going to move on, if it's okay with the chair, to slide 7. I think the longest, or the most changes that the staff recommends, there are 2 regulations in particular. That's Regulation 103-102. It relates to the definitions for motor vehicle carriers, and also 103-133, which basically includes the requirements that each type of carrier, taxis, non-emergency vehicles, have to comply, with which they have to comply. So I'm going to highlight some of the changes, Chair Belser, and if you have questions, please let me know. But I don't intend to read the entire list. Okay. Of course, if you recall, I mentioned that Act 214 of 2022 basically restructured the way that the Commission processes and adjudicates transportation applications. So a theme that you will see throughout the proposed changes to the regulations includes deleting references to PC and N, which is public convenience and necessity, as you know, deleting references to FWA, fit, willing, and able, deleting references to the words public convenience and necessity. There is a deletion in the proposed reg which deletes the phrase "and which remuneration is determined on an hourly basis." That's because carriers can determine their charges or fees by using a methodology other than using an hourly basis. Additional changes include adding definitions for Class C non-emergency certificate and Class C stretcher van certificate, deleting the phrase wheelchair van and replacing it with the phrase wheelchair accessible vehicle. So those are some of the highlights regarding the proposed changes for Regulation 103-102.
Chair Belser,
Commissioner Carly Williams?
thank you. Director Boyd, just
Yes,
for
ma'am.
clarification, what you're saying about a 102, in the definitions, these are definitions that needed to change based on the statute that was passed in Act.
A lot of them are, Commissioner Williams. Now, the update would include the remuneration that's included, because carriers can base their fees or their invoices or their charges for their services using methodology other than, or charging other than based on an hourly basis. They can charge per trip, for an example. One other I think reason for the change, wheelchair accessible vehicle is more, is the terminology I think that's used now versus wheelchair van. So
Okay.
yes, ma'am. But
So
a lot of the change.
blend of the statute, the impact of the statute, as well as 2024, 2023 terminology.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Ms. Boyd, do you want to go through your overview and then we'll go through section by section, or you want to go through section by section now?
I think you should consider doing it section by
Okay.
section now, because then your record will,
That's
all your
fine.
comments will be in close proximity.
Mr. Mustin, do you have any comments on the amendments proposed for 102? Mr. McGill, you're welcome to sit at the table with Mr. Mustin.
And that may be helpful. We'll see how this goes. I think the only thing that jumped out at me that didn't occur to me before is in the change for non-emergency vehicle. So it would say means a vehicle that is used for providing for a fee or charge non-emergency transportation for passengers. And it's deleting out the patients in stable medical condition.
Mr. Mustin, can you give me a reference to what?
I'm sorry, yes. So we're looking at 102. This is on page 10. I'm looking at page 10 of the version that's in the state register. So it'd be 102, number what is now number 21, definition for non-emergency vehicle.
Okay. Please go, I'm sorry I interrupted you, but
No,
go
you're
ahead
fi-
with your concern.
So I was just kind of puzzling over if you take out the reference to patients in stable medical condition, and then it says, it includes wheelchair van, but not taxi cab. So if it now just reads a vehicle that is used for providing non-emergency transportation for passengers, that would seem to encompass taxis as well. And there may be some changes later on that kind of address that. It just seems to kind of be all-encompassing if you take out the reference to the...
And we need to leave in there, your suggestion is to leave in not including, but not taxi cabs, the phrase, but not taxi cabs.
I think that's right, because otherwise non-emergency vehicle it would seem to me would encompass everything.
Well, and if you look down at 30 under wheelchair accessible vehicle on that same page, it does reference other than a
Other
taxi
than.
cab.
Right, so maybe if you leave that, but not taxi cabs, maybe that would cover that.
Okay. So ORS would recommend leaving in but not taxi cab.
I think so, yes, ma'am.
Chair Belsler,
Is there?
let me, through you, would you ask Mr. Mushkin this? Is he okay? I'm looking at ORS's comments. This is dated back June of 8th, 2021. Is Mr. Mushkin comfortable with the words medically necessary transportation for passengers?
I think that would be fine.
Okay. Just,
Where would that go in number 21, Ms. Boyd?
so that would, after the word, let's see, it would read, means a vehicle that is used for providing for a fee or charge, non-emergency, medically necessary transportation for passengers.
Just come up here. Yeah, I don't know that. Yeah. I think that would work.
Do we know, why were we taking out the phrase, why is the proposal to remove the phrase but not taxi cabs?
Okay, let's see. Where is that in?
And
That's in 20, the
It's
current
in-
20?
It's in the new 21, and it's still in 30. In 30, under wheelchair accessible vehicles, it says other than a taxi cab, which is but I think my thought is that some of these non-emergency vehicles are, is it Health and Human Services that has the transport, and the overall contract and the transport that, and they do things that are like for dialysis and doctor's visits for some of those. It's not something you would need a, ambulance, which would for, but just transportation to get people to, they don't need a specialized vehicle. They just need transportation to get to like dialysis, doctor's appointments, and things like that. And I thought that's where, but I don't know if that under that contract that they put them in taxi cabs. I think they put them in. Mr. Mushkin, can you or Mr. McGill shed any light on? I can't remember the name of the group that was doing it when I was familiar.
So yes, Commissioner, there is an organization that contracts with all non-emergency carriers to serve as a broker, if you will.
Thank you.
Now, it's not required that they go through them, but a very, very large majority of non-emergency certificate holders go through those brokers.
Okay. Well, that's something that we will consider as well. to make the edit that ORS is suggesting about adding the language medically necessary and whether or not to strike but not other than taxi cabs or but not taxi cabs. That's something we'll consider. And Mr. Mushton, if y'all want to file additional comments following the proceeding, we are required to hold the record open for at least 5 days, and would appreciate any follow-up language as well.
Sure, we can do that.
Thank you. Does that cover that, Ms. Boyd?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Belser?
Commissioner Williams?
Thank you. This question, if it's appropriate right now, is for Mr. Mustin and ORS.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I read side by side your comments from July the 6th, and I just wanted to understand if the process that transpired after that included you all, and you all were now, generally supportive of the changes that were submitted on October 19th to the Legislative Council. Because there are differences in what you submitted and what we're looking at. And so I wondered if there was some discussion, some frame of reference that I could have for that.
No, I think we're generally supportive. I think we did have the one comment that I think we'll talk about it when we get to it on 133.
Okay.
The non-emergency vehicle, that was something that honestly just occurred to me as I was flipping through. But generally, yes, I think we're in agreement.
That cuts out some of my questions, so thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Boyd?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Okay, the next regulation is 103-110, Chair Belser, and it's regarding Class A motor carriers, and the phrase of public convenience and necessity is deleted, and also of PCNN.
Any comments regarding the proposed edits to 103-110? Hearing none. Ms. Boyd?
All right. 103-111, the proposal deletes the phrase of public convenience and necessity and of PCNN.
Any comments or questions regarding the proposed amendment to 103-111? Hearing none. Ms. Boyd?
103-112, again, delete of public convenience and necessity and the phrase of PCNN, make a spelling correction, and add the phrase stretcher vans.
And a grammatical quotation mark too, I believe. Is that correct? After non-emergency vehicles. I think there was a closing quotation. Any comments or questions regarding the proposed amendments to 103-112? Hearing none. Ms. Boyd?
Okay. 103-114, delete of public convenience and necessity and delete of PCNN or FWA, and also see where the word either is deleted.
Any comments or questions regarding 103-114? Ms. Boyd?
103-115, delete of public convenience and necessity and delete of PCNN.
Any comments or questions regarding Regulation 103-115? If anybody has any questions or comments, you got to speak up because I'm going to start going through these, so just get my attention. Hearing none. Ms. Boyd?
103-130, delete certificate of PCNN, certificate of FWA, charter bus certificate.
Any questions or comments regarding 103-130? Hearing none. Ms. Boyd?
103-132, delete the regulation regarding publication of notice of filing. And this is due to the changes brought about through Act number 214 of 2022.
Any questions or comments regarding deletion of 103-132? Hearing none. Ms. Boyd?
Okay, 103-133, want to highlight some of the changes from this regulation. right. So the proposed regulation deletes the constraint that motor carrier applications cannot be amended within 48 hours of a scheduled hearing. Additional proposed changes include deleting references to the phrase, or the acronym rather, PCNN, and the phrase public convenience and necessity, conforming the regulation to Act 214 of 2022, adding a requirement for the fit element, amending the requirement for the able element, deleting the requirement that allowing motor carrier applicant to file a statement indicating the applicant's purpose for seeking a Class E certificate, deleting requirements for filing a certificate of FWA, including gender-neutral references, deleting the words cab or package delivery and or packages. Yes, those are some of the changes, Chair. Belson.
With regard to 103, 133, comments or questions? Mr. Mushin, was this the one that you indicated there were?
No, ma'am. I think the one that is when we get to, well, let's see.
There's a lot in this one.
So I think is it this? Where's the? I think it's the next one. 133.5. Is that a separate?
Ms. Boyd, there's more than one slide on 133.
There is, Chair Belson.
So this, tell me where this first one is just goes to. We might want to break this regulation down in groups. So this one is just under the part 133.1.
No, ma'am. That's
No?
just the way I separate it. There isn't any, no, ma'am.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
Well, with regard to the changes that are noted on this slide, are there any issues?
I don't believe so. The question that we had was with respect to 103, 133.5, which relates to the non-emergency insurance limit. So
Okay.
I think we'll get to that in a little bit.
All right. How about let's go to the next slide then. Ms. Boyd?
You want me to read what it says, Chair?
Well, I want you, if you can point us to where it is in the regulation.
Safety rating. I think it's at the top of page 14.
Okay. And if you could explain it, please, ma'am.
This is under the passenger
Under fit?
fit, yes. If the applicant just reads, if the proposed change reads, if the applicant has a safety rating, it must be provided with the application.
But this is,
I can go through the rest of these if that's what you're looking for. I see where the gender neutral references are included.
okay.
Where we replace the pronoun he with the words the applicant.
Okay.
Also under fit for passengers, the applicant must demonstrate that the applicant proposes to operate the motor vehicle satisfactorily. And other than numbering, I see permissive language that's been included,
Okay.
where the word may is replaced by the word can. Moving on down the page, under non-emergency vehicles, which number 6 is now number 5, we strike specific citations to federal law, as those citations can change. Strike the acronym of PCNN, and there's another citation, federal citation, Part 391, qualifications of drivers, CSA, safety regulations, all that's been stricken. We include reference under A So now it's the new non-emergency vehicles, capital A, number 1. At a minimum, the carrier must comply with the first requirement, possessing at least a current medical examiner certificate. We strike in AC reference to specific equipment. As I think, for example, in A1C, the two-way radio may or may not be used. It may be more modern equipment.
Okay.
You want me to continue?
Yes.
Over on page 15, under section little f, driver must complete 12 hours of in-service training, and we're just more specific here, describing what those 12 hours include. 6 hours of which must be CPR and first aid, 6 of which must be in the area of safety.
Okay.
We add in a requirement that all drivers must be a minimum of 18 years of age.
Chair Belzer,
Commissioner Williams?
thank you. I keep reading that one, and I know what the intention is, and it may be my colloquial look at this. I would often say at a minimum, or must be. When I say it out loud, it doesn't make any sense, but I want to make sure that it says 18 or older. It's not saying you have to be 18 years old.
When you say you're talking about all drivers must be a minimum of 18 years of age?
Right, right.
Okay, so tell me which language you would use, Commissioner Williams?
I don't know. I just had to read this one several times with a concern that it not say that you must be the minimum age of 18.
What if it said must be 18 years of age or older?
Yes.
Okay.
And take
So-
out the word minimum.
So I think you may also want to look at an existing reg. Look over on number 7, Class C taxi and Class C charter carriers under capital A.
I'm
All-
not following.
and that's-
Page 7 or number 7?
It will, in the proposed
where-
regulation, it will be on page 17. But I'm just looking down because I know this isn't new language in the regulation
Okay.
that reference. So
Right,
I'm just
I see it.
bringing that to your attention.
Yes.
And so you may consider looking through and changing any other reference that, I see another one on page 20 that's been existing. So if you want to change it, just remember that there are others
Okay.
if it's confusing.
But I mean, if it says at a minimum 18 years, I mean, that's not saying that they have to be 18. Only 18.
Right.
I mean,
I recognize that. I'm just admitting my own, that I had to read that one twice.
Yes,
to
ma'am.
think about it.
And if you all decide to change it, I'm just saying you may want to make the others that
Right,
were, okay.
right.
All right.
any thoughts, Mr. Mushin?
I think either way would be fine.
Thank you.
Okay. So we are on still non-emergency vehicles, driver qualifications. So the driving record is now included. The proposal includes the driving record, a certified copy of the driver's 3-year driving record.
Chair Belzer.
Commissioner Williams?
On this one, I thought about what if that 18-year-old doesn't have a 3-year driving record?
I would have to turn, Chair, I think that would need to be asked of ORS because these documents aren't filed with us. I think ORS's inspectors I don't think the PSC ever would monitor or audit this information. So I'd have to, respectfully, okay.
Are these documents that are to be maintained in the carrier's files? Under the driver qualifications, don't the carriers, these non-emergency carriers, have to maintain files related to the vehicles and drivers?
Yes, that's correct.
And so these are things that are maintained by the carrier. They're not filed with ORS or the PSC.
I don't think they're filed here, but I think Mr. Mushing can correct me.
They're not.
ORS has the ability to audit.
Right, that's what
Okay.
I'm saying. They have to keep, the carrier has to keep these in their files, and ORS inspectors will periodically audit those files. Is that correct, Mr.
Correct.
McGill, Mr. Mush?
Yes.
So how would, Mr. McGill, do you know how an inspector would treat an 18-year-old driver that may not have a 3-year driving record?
Honestly, I don't know that we have encountered that situation in the past. I think that we would probably look to make sure they have a valid driver's license and look at that criminal background check as well. And look to see, I think we would treat that valid driver's license to fulfill that requirement at that point in time.
Does ORS have a issue with this? I mean, it would be worked.
No, I mean, my recollection is, and Mr. McGill can correct me, is that when you request a copy of your driving record, that it goes back 3 years, or does it go back further than that?
Unless you specifically request it, it's just 1 3.
Yes.
Okay.
The SLED background check is just 3.
It's just 3. So I think if you requested the 3-year background check, even if you had only been driving for
Well,
2 years, it would go.
Oh, wait a minute. When you say SLED background check, that's not the driving record. Isn't the driving record
Well-
issued by DMV? The driving record would be DMV.
Yes,
The
DMV.
SLED, the sex offender registry might be SLED or
Right.
or other criminal.
But, and
background.
I stand to be corrected, but I have a feeling that if you ask DMV for a 3-year driving record, then if you'd only had your license for 2 years,
You could only go back 2
you
years.
could only go back 2 years, right? So, I mean, you could say, you may have to say all drivers must be a minimum of 18 years of age and have had a license for at least 3 years if you wanted to address that.
I didn't think that was the requirement. I really thought that what you were saying was that you were requesting of the DMV 3 years of information, and it just seemed a little bit ambiguous to me.
No, and that's a fair point. I mean, I think if they only had a 2-year driving record, then I don't think we would have an issue with that. It's just, a minimum of the 3-year driving record would be what you're looking for, but if they've only been driving 2 years, then
Right.
Well, the driving record would show when the license was issued if it was within the 3-year period. It would say, wouldn't it? Or you'd see that from the driver's license when it was issued.
right.
So,
And Chair, if I may interrupt too, this language is also already contained in the Class C taxi, Class C charter carriers. I'm looking at the proposed reg, page 17. So ORS probably has experience with this language. I mean, they're auditors.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
I think
that's-
if we encountered this situation, we would look at it, we would say, okay, you've only been driving 2 years. I don't think we would take issue with that. So, but if for somebody who's been driving for 20 years, we at least want to see that 3-year driving record.
thank you, sir.
Madam
Commissioner
Chair,
Caston?
not trying to beat this dead horse to death, but, I know folks that haven't gotten their license until they were 19, 20. And I guess theoretically you could get your license at 18 and have 0, which I'm not sure how comfortable, one would necessarily feel getting in that particular vehicle. But that said, with all the conversation we've had, is it okay with the way it's written in ORS's opinion, or is there any modification that should be made?
I think we're comfortable with that as written. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
All I needed. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Is there, Commissioner Thomas?
thank you. So looking at item H on page 15, it talks about the state in which the driver's license was issued. And then you go to page 20, I mean, not 20, excuse me, page 17, near the bottom, item number 2, the driving record. It talks about, or the state which the driver has been domiciled for such period. My question is, should that be consistent with what's on page 15? I don't know.
Any thoughts about conforming them?
Here we're talking about.
Well, once somebody's been living in South Carolina for 30 days, aren't they supposed to get a South Carolina driver's license?
Yes, ma'am.
But to get a 3-year record, if somebody just moves here and starts driving, do they have to go to their prior state to get the record?
Well, and that's why I was asking the question, is, it just doesn't seem to be consistent on page 15 and 17.
So, Mr. Mushin, would you look at, whether or not that, what is that? Let's see, 6A2 on page 17, should the language on page 15 that we've been talking about be made to conform to that same language and provide a comment to us?
I think that makes sense. So you would do, so the driving record, 33-year driving record issued by DMV of the state versus 3-year driving record issued by, and such record in which the driver has been domiciled. So you would basically,
Mr. Mushin, it's
Yes,
a little
ma'am.
bit difficult to try. I know we're putting y'all in an awkward position to try to get an answer from you right here on the fly.
right.
Would that be
We'll
something
happy to
that we
look at
could
that.
look at and file in a comment?
Absolutely, yes, ma'am.
I mean, you're welcome to go ahead and try to answer, but I just think sometimes you need to have a minute to really digest what we're talking about.
Right, I think we certainly can do that, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, sir. Make a note of that. Can you make a note of that? All right. Anything else on the driving record, background check, sex offender registry? That are the proposed changes on 15. Hearing none. Ms. Boyd?
Okay, do you want me to continue on page 15?
Well, I think the next one kind of meets up with taking out some of the federal references. I don't think there's anything else on 15. And are we on the next slide yet?
I'm looking, I think no, we're not, because maintenance requirements appear at the bottom of page 16. And then it says amend non-emergency vehicles minimum periodic inspection standards. Maybe that's on, yeah. So over on page 17 at the top, the last description at the bottom of the slide, the current slide references the change at the top of page 17.
Does ORS have any concerns about the edits to the remaining edits on page 16 and top of page 17? Or commissioners have questions?
Chair Belzer,
Commissioner Carolee Williams?
thank you. I noticed that, Director Boyd, that you have changed IE to EG in most places.
Let's
Correct?
see, I'm trying to find where you are.
Well, I'm gonna, in number 10, the new number 10, there's still an IE left. It's obviously not a big deal, but it appears that you have taken out IEs and substituted EGs.
Okay,
And so in 10, there is an
an
IE
IE,
left.
okay. Thank you.
So we're at the top of page 17. Does that include subsection E about the minimum insurance limits?
I think we're getting to that next.
Okay.
I think that's on the next slide. No? Okay. All right, we are through new subsection D. We're through minimum periodic inspection standards on top of page 17. So next we are at schedule of minimum insurance limits.
So our only comment there was, I think, just a clarifying point. So in this, there's a specific minimum insurance limits for the non-emergency vehicles of $1 million of the combined each occurrence. And so when you look at, which I don't believe is part of this document, there were no changes to this regulation, but 103-172, which is kind of the generic schedule of minimum limits. And there you have 25, 50, 25 as being the minimum. So I think our general recommendation was maybe in 172, adding some language that would say, you know, unless otherwise provided by the regulations, just to make clear that you've got a specific regulation in 133-5E with respect to minimum insurance limits for non-emergency vehicles, and that 103-172, which is more of the generic, broader limits, that those are the limits that would apply unless something is otherwise specified. That
Okay. But where we are now on page 17 with subsection E, schedule of minimum insurance limits, isn't that just for non-emergency vehicles?
correct.
Okay.
So really the change that we would suggest would be to 172. It's just because we're at the insurance limits that kind of led to that comment, and we can talk about that as we get further down the road if we need to.
Okay. And your recommendation here is to add some language of not unless otherwise, say that again, would you?
So the recommendation would not be to change anything with respect to
E.
E, correct.
Okay, it would be over in 172.
Yes, ma'am,
Which hasn't been noticed yet.
correct.
Okay. Okay. Will you bring that back up when we get to 173 and?
Be happy to,
Okay.
yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Questions? Okay, Ms. Boyd?
Okay. I think we're through with slide 16. So continuing with the other changes on page 17.
Just
Say, so
the
there's a
same
new number
deletion of
6.
PC and N, that kind of thing?
And then over on page 18, gender neutral, making paragraph 5 gender neutral, striking engaging in business. ORS files makes a filing with the commission when applicants have not complied with the commission's order.
Okay.
So that's the reason for the change in number 6. Looking further on page 18 down at the bottom, well, in the middle and the bottom, I see where we struck the words his or her, or his/her, over on page 19.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Thomas?
thank you. Can we go back to page 17 for just a minute? Again, looking at item 2 at the bottom of the page, and the sentence ends with which the driver is or has been domiciled for such period. And then go down to item number 4, that sentence ends, or the current state of residence of the driver. My question is just simply, should those two be consistent? That's all. And just something to think about for the follow-up comments.
I think that's different because
Thank you.
talking about the license versus the record. Madam Chair, we'll be glad to look at that. I do think there may be a difference between 2, which is talking about the driving record. So, for instance, you could have somebody that's been living in South Carolina for a year and were in North Carolina for 2 years versus the driver's license, which is really more talking about what's in existence at that time. So, but we can look at that and provide some comments on that too.
Thank you.
I think we're on page 19 now, Chair.
Okay.
Did you say yes?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Struck PCNN in paragraph 10 and the sentence, this paragraph is inapplicable to Class C charter carriers. There are some gender-neutral references in paragraph 11. And then the word cab is struck in paragraph 12A. Gender-neutral reference, well, let's see, also struck in 12A1. The word his is struck in paragraph 12A1 also. The words phrases or packages are struck in 12A2 and 3.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Williams?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Executive Director Boyd, could you click the PowerPoint to where you are now,
Oh, sure, I'm sorry.
if you don't mind?
Let's see. I think this is the right slide. Yeah, I think this is the right, because the wheelchair van accessible are in stretcher vans, page 19, new paragraph 7. So I think this is the correct one.
Commissioner, did you have a question, or you just want to make sure we were on the right slide? Okay, thank you.
Oh, yeah, I'm just reading down the page since the chair wanted me. Yes, sir. Let's see.
But these are just some of these conforming, striking PCNN. I think you'd already mentioned the wheelchair accessible vehicle instead of van.
Yeah, and public convenience and necessity.
Thank you.
Those are all like, well, not the wheelchair accessible vehicle, but the.
But you'd already mentioned these in
Yes,
your
ma'am.
in your overview.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Is that okay?
All right.
Commissioner?
Yes, ma'am. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, so over on page 20, I see in paragraph 9, the sex offender registry where we
Those are
strike,
just gender.
yes, gender neutral, yes, ma'am. And that's all I
Gender-neutral.
really see on that
Okay.
page. And then on page 21, believe it or not, I don't see anything.
On page 21, I think it's
see something?
it's a conforming, and 134, conforming to Act 214.
Oh, that's on page 22. That's
Oh,
at the
I'm
top
sorry,
of page
it's on
22.
my 21.
Oh, okay. Yes, ma'am, you're correct. So what we did here, okay, so now we need to move to the next slide.
All right. Mr. Mustin, do you have anything other on, in 103, 133? Anything further?
No, ma'am, I don't
Okay.
believe so.
Thank you. All right, so now we're on 134.
Yes, ma'am. So the title of this regulation is when a hearing may be held. And of course, you know, that is the process now is if after the commission posts an application to provide from an entity to provide motor vehicle carrier services in the state of South Carolina, staff posts the application on the commission's webpage for 14 days. And thereafter, if the commission doesn't receive an objection to that filing or a filing for motor vehicle carrier certificate, the item is placed on the commission's agenda for the commission to make a determination as to whether to issue an order to allow the carrier to provide services. So what we tried to do in the proposed 103, 134 regulation is to conform it to the new law, conform the process for when a hearing may be held with Act 214 of 2022.
Okay.
Okay. Do you want to
Any
ask?
questions, comments on the proposed changes to 103, 134? Hearing none.
103, 135, deleting references to PCNN or PCNN and FWA.
Any questions regarding the amendments to 103-135? Hearing none. Ms. Boyd?
The protest would take place under the regulation, well, the statute first and foremost, and then the regulation 103, 134. So there's no need to, we're requesting to delete 103, 136, Chair.
Requested the deletion of 103, 136. Any questions or comments regarding that one? Hearing none. Ms. Boyd?
103, 137, also want to delete this regulation. It restricts when an applicant may amend the applicant's authority or relief sought in the application prior to a hearing and just no longer see the need for this based on Act 214 of 2022.
Any questions or comments on removing 103-137? Hearing none, Ms. Boyd?
103, 138, restrictions, limitations, and terms. The acronym of PCNN is deleted, and also and are required by the public convenience and necessity.
Okay. And that's bringing it into compliance with Act 214, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. That's right.
Any questions or comments? No questions or comments on 103, 138, so let's move to 139.
139, we're striking, propose to strike of PCNN, FWA, or charter bus certificate and just leave it generic. Leave the word certificate. It's generic, doesn't apply to any specific type of certificate. And we also strike within 90 days of receipt of the filing.
Okay.
And add the phrase or rejected.
Any comments or concerns regarding these amendments to 139? Hearing none, Ms. Boyd?
We are proposing a new regulation regarding a request for extension to comply with the commission order. It basically states applications for extension shall include the current deadline, requested deadline, and the reason for the extension. And paragraph 2, reasons for extensions for up to 1 year to comply with the requirements of a commission order will be considered for good cause shown. It also states if a motor carrier needs 1 year or more to comply, the motor carrier shall be required to file a new application to ensure the completeness and up-to-date accuracy of the application.
Comments or questions regarding this amendment?
What are you saying?
1 year or more. You're on.
I think, so I think the question is up to 1 year, and then the next one is needs 1 year or more. So I'm assuming the first part is
You get
365 days.
363 or 364, depending if it's leap year. And then if you need 364 or 365, you got to file a new application.
Okay,
That's how I read it.
that's fair.
May be wrong. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Mustian, if you have a suggestion you want to make in post-hearing comments, please feel free.
No, I mean, we'll look at it. I don't know that it's, we just wanted to make sure we understood what we were saying.
Well, and I mean, ORS has to help with this, so
Sure.
we need to be on the same page.
Understood.
Ms. Boyd?
Okay. 103, 150.
Oh, that was 140. There we go. Okay.
Beginning operations under a certificate. So references to PCNN are deleted. Also delete requirements for beginning operations under a certificate of FWA. Delete the phrase taxicab or limousine and cab. Add the phrase motor vehicle. Delete the word passenger and add the word person. Amend the regulation to allow an ORS representative and other persons to take a motor vehicle quote out of service and to include a gender-neutral reference.
Comments or questions regarding these amendments to 103, 150? Hearing none, Ms. Boyd?
Okay. 103, 151, registration of motor vehicles. We delete the phrase, provided, however, a tractor permit card may not be transferred to a truck. Also delete the license, references to a license fee that's paid semi-annually in advance, and the reference to July 1st of each year.
Yeah, we're just doing, ORS is just doing
Once a year.
annual instead of semi-annual. Okay. Questions or comments on 151? Hearing none. Ms. Boyd?
Okay, 153, marking or identification of vehicles. Delete place of principal office and also the sample, just in case someone's name is Richard, or someone's business name is Richard Skinner Trucking Company.
Okay.
We replaced that with Stacy Doe, DBA Doe's Transportation.
Any questions or comments regarding the changes to 103, 153? Hearing none, Ms. Boyd?
103, 154, add the conjunction if and delete of PC and N.
Those are just conforming. Any questions or comments regarding 154? Hearing none, Ms. Boyd?
103, 155, delete of PCNN or certificate of FWA to conform to Act 214.
Any questions on the amendment to 155? Hearing none, Ms. Boyd?
157, duplication of authority due to Act 214 of 2022. We don't see any restrictions on a carrier having more than one type of authority, so or more than one certificate. So we're recommending to delete this regulation.
Questions or comments? Hearing none. On 157, the next one, Ms. Boyd?
103, 158, issuance of bills of lading. Delete of PCNN and FWA to conform to Act 214 of 2022.
Any questions on the edits to 158? Hearing none, Ms. Boyd?
103, 159, contents of bills of lading. We include reference to possibility that a bill of lading can be generated via paper or electronic means. We also include a reference to signature of cosigner / shipper, and we delete the word and. Delete and add the word and, rather.
Delete the period and add the word and. Delete the period out of semicolon. A couple of places. Any questions, comments about the amendments to 103, 159? Hearing none, Ms. Boyd?
103, 162, bill of lading to accompany shipment. Delete of PCNN or FWA to comply with Act 214.
With regard to 162, any questions or comments? Hearing none, Ms. Boyd?
103, 164, suspension of operations. We add a requirement for the applicant to indicate a time period for the proposed suspension of service and delete information related to an application for suspension of operations in excess of 12 months.
Do you recall the justification for this amendment to delete the 12-month? Is it, and I reckon because there's no determination of public convenience and necessity after Act 214? Does that have anything to do with it? I mean, I think I would always read this regulation that the 12 months, public convenience and necessity changes over time. And so if somebody was going to be out of operation for a long, an extended period of time, they're holding up a certificate that might have gone, that somebody else may have been able to do. But now that we're not having those hearings on PC and N.
Chair, I don't think, because I think under Act 214, the commission no longer really looks at the public convenience and necessity. I don't think so.
I don't think it hurts. I was just kind of curious.
But I think.
Okay, that's fine.
I don't think there's anything that, I guess we were wondering why do we need the language for if it's an excess
Well, and I think after
months?
214, it's not needed. That's what I was saying. I think before, when the commission's having to make a decision on public convenience and necessity, and you've got certificates that are out there that are just not being used,
Right.
it could impact PC
Yes.
and N.
And I think the deletion, I think a carrier may still ask for that, ask for a suspension in excess of 12 months, Chair. I don't think this prohibits.
It won't. I don't think so either. Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. All right, so let's see.
Any further questions or comments on 164? Hearing none. Ms. Boyd?
So, Madam Chair, the next one is 173. So,
okay.
you want me to jump in here?
So you want to look at 172?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Ms. Boyd, you with him?
Ooh, Chair and
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Mushroom through the chair. I think you may have to consider having us
Once-
notice that. I just thought about that.
I know, it's-
Because 172 is not part of this proposed reg
well,
packet. Now, I'm not saying you can't. I just thought about that.
Mr. Mustian, how about state the concern again, please?
So I think it's a minor concern, but the point that we noted is in 172, which is kind of the general schedule of minimum limits for all carriers. And so, for instance, that's spelled out with 1 to 7 passengers, 25,000, 50,000, 25,000. And then when you kind of look at the non-emergency vehicles, which has $1 million limit. So I think just to make clear that there was no conflict between those two, the suggestion was to add to 172 language that would say something to the effect of, unless otherwise provided or unless otherwise specified in these regulations, this would be the minimum limits.
Well,
I
could we add something to?
You could also add something to 133.5E
That
that would
this
say,
takes supersedes or other word over the reg 172.
I think that would do it too.
And
and that would
that
resolve
one's
the
been
concern.
noticed.
Yes,
The
ma'am.
changes. And then, now, Ms. Boyd, wasn't there a follow-up insurance workshop that was held? Is there gonna be something
did.
coming out of that?
Well, yeah, but yes, ma'am, but that's covering more of 103, 172. We hope to. We were waiting until after the beginning of the year. We wanted to review another state agency's report. That
I understand, but that would be a comment to note when we do a drafting
Yes.
for 172, would it not?
Right.
But in the meantime, if we added something to page 17F, schedule of minimum limits under the non-emergency vehicles, that this takes priority or precedence or supersedes or whatever word we come up with.
Right.
And you're gonna file something with us.
yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And I think that would work. And the notice provision is a good point. So we'll see what we can come up with to offer to you.
I just
Thank
thought about that, Mr.
Yep.
Mushroom. Sorry.
No, that's
Thought
a
about that.
good point.
Okay.
Okay.
Any further comments or questions? Hearing none. 170, we'll go to 173.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, 173 adds criteria for Class E motor carriers valuations. It basically states a Class E carrier's intrastate valuation must meet the minimum requirements established by the interstate rules issued by the Surface Transportation Board, or STB. If a Class E carrier chooses to offer valuation options higher than the STB's required minimums, the customer must be provided with terms, conditions, and pricing to the service being rendered.
Is this at 60 cents per pound?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Which, let me look and see if that's still the case, Chair. I think it is. Well, let's see, I made a note.
Wasn't that the going rate on the standard bill of lading for household goods?
I think so, Chair, but I have a note here from Ms. Pittman that it says there is no regulation on the 60 cents per pound, so ORS proposes new language. The 60 cent per pound comes from federal regulations. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Mustian, were you going to add something?
No, ma'am. I think that
Okay.
clarified it.
But that's what, by the STB, when we say the STB, that is Surface Transportation Board, right?
That's what I said.
And that's
yes,
where
ma'am.
the 60 cents
Yes,
comes
ma'am.
from. Okay. But, I mean, customers generally have an option to pay for extra insurance beyond that, right?
I think that's what this says.
Okay.
They may offer higher valuation options, yes.
It just, the 60 cents should be included, 60 cents per pound should be included in the normal rate. If they want additional insurance, they're just going to have to pay for it.
Yes, ma'am. And they have to, at this new regulation, they have to be, the carrier must provide the customer with that information.
Right, okay. it really just seems like that is standard practice and we're just adding it to the regulation. Would you agree with that, Mr. Mustin?
I think that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any further comments on 173? Hearing none, Ms. Boyd?
Okay, 178.
Madam Chair, could we just, one thing that we were just looking at in.
Oh,
I'm
I'm
sorry.
Go ahead. You were looking at in which one?
173.3, what is now 173.3, carriers of extremely low value commodities. I'm not sure that's a little vague as far as what is an extremely low value. Maybe that's.
Actually, I really think that thing is held over from when the commission used to do, what do you call the certificate that went over to motor carriers? It was like sand and gravel and, dump truck hauling stuff. And that certificate went over to first DOT, and then I think it's now out of DPS, and what do they call it? Motor truck, in that group, and they issue a certificate over there. I really think that's where that's left over from, is my recollection. So that might be something that may need to come out at some point. I don't know about here, since it's not noticed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's problematic, other than extremely low value is kind of a nebulous term, but.
The other thing might be, well, I don't know that would be covered. We've got there's a franchise that does junk hauling, which they don't need a certificate for, and but they also do household goods. The junk hauling part, of course, they don't need a certificate to that, so they don't have to. Maybe that's the low value. I don't know. That's something we need to look at for the next round, Mr. Mustin.
Yeah. We can look at it and see if we have some suggestions.
Okay. Ms. Boyd?
103.178, which amended will read proof of insurance required, and the title is amended and the phrase in triplicate is deleted.
Okay. Any questions about 178? Hearing none. Ms. Boyd?
190, tariffs now must be filed with the commission instead of approved before commencement of operations. So
That's just conforming with Act 214, is it not?
it is.
Thank you, ma'am. Any further questions or comments?
Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
there are some other changes.
Ah,
Okay, so amend the title of the regulation, delete of PCNN, conform the regulation to Act 214, as you just said. Reference the regulation 103-173 and delete basic amount and insurance for excess related to declaration of value. Delete reference to excess value. Add phrase, if any, to apply to governing publications. And add motor vehicle carriers need only file maximum rates with the commission and provide a copy to the ORS.
okay. Questions on amendments to 190 or comments? Hearing none.
Okay, Chair, it appears as if 191, 192, 193, 194 are all deleted due to Act 214 of 2022. 191 is commission to establish rates. 192, rates must be just and reasonable. 193, hearing and publication on new rate schedule. 194, criteria for establishment of rates.
Okay. Any questions or comments regarding deletion of 191, 192, 193, and 194? Hearing none. Ms. Boyd?
195, duties of Class C household good movers, restrike of PCNN and FWA due to Act 214.
Okay. Any questions on 195? Hearing none. Ms. Boyd?
196, maintenance of copies of tariff strike of PCNN and the phrase and approved by.
And these are Okay.
to conform with Act 214.
214. Any questions or comments on 196? Hearing none.
We're striking or asking to delete 197, 198, and 199 due to Act 214. 197 is undue preference not permitted. 198, variations in charges prohibited. And 199, allowances prohibited.
With regard to 197, 198, 199, are there any comments, questions? Hearing none. Ms. Boyd?
199.5, adjustment of bills. So amend this regulation to conform to Act 214, delete language governing customer inadvertently undercharged, provide that when a customer is willfully overcharged, the motor carrier must comply with South Carolina Code annotated section 34-31-20A regarding the rate of interest that's to be paid to the customer due to the willful overcharge. Also to amend to provide the basis for the motor carrier's charges shall be provided to customers in writing. And I have in other related issues. And I'm under, yes, ma'am.
Didn't the consumer advocate file some comments about the interest?
So this, in Articles 3, 4, 5, 7, and 7, 3, 4, 5, and 7, this language is also included, I think, in those regulations that are now pending before the General Assembly regarding how interest is assessed or calculated when a customer is willfully overcharged. So this is consistent with the other regulations you've already promulgated. And I can't remember if it was Department of Consumer Affairs or not, Chair.
Okay. Does ORS have any questions or comments about this section? One of the comments from the consumer advocate had to do, I think, with the time that it takes for inadvertent. They referenced 199.5.1 and also referenced okay, I think we're okay on that. The legal rate of interest.
Was that for willful overcharge?
That's under willful overcharge. I think the Supreme Court issues a order in January of each year setting the legal rate of interest for the next year. So that's just something that we may need to do in-house, is do an annual order, but we can talk about that. Any further questions or thoughts, comments?
So, Chair, let me just clarify.
Okay.
So under 343120A, it reads, in all cases of accounts stated and in all cases wherein any sum or sums of money shall be ascertained, I'm going to skip some words, shall draw interest according to law, the legal interest shall be at the rate of 8 3/4% per annum. Then there's a section B that says, a money decree or judgment of a court enrolled or entered must draw interest according to law. The legal rate of interest is equal to the prime rate listed in the Wall Street Journal plus percentage points. The South Carolina Supreme Court shall issue an order by January 15th of each year confirming the annual prime rate. So I just want to make sure we're all.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about that comes out from the Supreme Court each year, but
Okay.
that's on a judgment.
I think so, Chair.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Chair, I'm looking for your direction now.
Oh, I'm satisfied. Anybody else? I think I was the only one that was questioning. Okay, thank you. Go
Okay.
ahead.
All right, 103.210, applications must specifically set forth commodities applied for. That's the title of that regulation. All we're doing is striking of PC and N. I see where it's a gender neutral. We're trying to make a correct gender reference, and that's all, Chair.
Okay, any comments on 103, 210. Hearing none.
Can I,
Oh, Mr.
can I
Mustard.
just be hyper technical? Is the, in 210-2, the 25 SC regs, is
Yeah.
that still 25?
That's true.
It may not be.
Mm.
It may still be 25. I don't know. I just know that they had renumbered them at some point, so
It's not. It's 10.
it is. Well, I know the PSCs are 10 but this
Oh,
is a
I'm
DHEC.
sorry.
This is a DHEC reg. I
DHEC.
think it's 61. It may still be 25. I don't know.
No, the chapter is 61, but the volume is 20. Is what? But I don't think the volumes go up to 25 anymore.
I don't.
Do we
think
have to
so.
have the volume?
My recommendation would be to take it out because that's what I typically do now. But that's my personal preference. So anyway,
Okay,
that
so you're recommending strike 25 from 210-2.
that's what I would suggest. Yes, ma'am.
All right. Ms. Boyd,
Yes, ma'am.
that's just a kind of clerical
It is.
thing, isn't it? And plus, this one was it was noticed. So
It is.
ORS
Notice.
recommends striking the volume 25 to that DHEC regulation. Okay. Anything else? Hearing none, Ms. Boyd.
Okay. All right, moving on to 220, use of leased vehicles. Amend the number of lease agreements copies filed. That's in 1H. And I think that's all.
Okay. Well, there was a striking of PCNN in the subarticle title, I think. but
Yeah, I
that's
think the
just- that's
legislative
just a
council did
cleanup.
that, Chair, because I don't think I necessarily included all the subarticles, and I think they did that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any questions or comments regarding the amendment to 220H? Hearing none. Ms. Boyd?
Chair, can you give me 1 second?
Sure. I think we're on 223.
Nope, I'm wrong. That was me. I apologize. That wasn't legislative council chair. I did that.
Okay.
I didn't want to misspeak. I struck the PCN. I apologize. Okay, 220. One.
23.
3. I didn't want to say something somebody did and be wrong.
No, thank you.
Okay, so here we are deleting a gender reference and correcting the misspell. We want to use ENSURE instead of INSURE.
Okay. Grammatical correction. Gender neutral correction. That's it.
Yes, ma'am.
Any questions or comments or concerns on 223? Hearing none. Ms. Boyd, 230.
Okay. 230. We amend this reg to include manifest and the retention period for manifest.
Okay. And remove a reference to PCNN and FWA.
Yes.
Any concerns, questions, comments about amendments to 230? Hearing none. 231.
Annual reports are no longer required to be filed for motor vehicle carriers, and so we're asking to delete this regulation.
Class C doesn't file annual reports?
I think they file gross receipts, Chair.
They're the gross receipts. True. Thank you. Okay. Any questions or comments about 231? Hearing none.
232, Chair, we are deleting a PCNN and FWA to conform with Act 214.
Okay. Any concerns with the amendments to 232? Hearing none.
Okay. 233, once again to comply with Act 214, delete of PCNN and FWA and strike a gender reference.
Any concerns with the changes to 232? Excuse me, 233. Hearing none. Ms. Boyd?
240, Chair, grounds for revocation of a certificate. We delete of PCNN and reference to the certificate of FWA. So that long strike in the middle, that's to delete the reference to certificate of FWA.
Any concerns with the amendments to 240? Hearing none. Ms.
Believe it or
Boyd?
not, Chair.
Is that it?
Yes, ma'am. That's it. Unless you have other questions.
Any Commissioner Carolyn Williams?
Thank you, Chair Belzer. And Director Boyd and ORS, it's amazing to me what you must have gone through, having looked at the differences between where you started and what you have and the kind of eagle eye that you need and the thoughtfulness that you need in terms of how all this works. I don't know if it's appropriate, but so I'm going to ask it and you can tell me if it's something we can talk about. I think we talked about the question of whether, well, I also appreciate all the minds beyond yours that went into this. One of the questions I think we talked about, Director Boyd, was the question of whether there ought to be guidance in the regulation regarding placarding and the requests that we get for particularly maybe because of privacy or security.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just curious, because that's not in here.
Yes, ma'am.
If there was good information learned from that discussion, whether you're able to have that discussion or whether that's just something for the future.
Yeah, so as you said, I referenced filing by Ms. Pittman from 2021, and in the middle of all of that, the back and forth, the workshops, Act 214 was passed. So then everybody just came back in and continued to work on this. And since then, as you know, we've had workshops on insurance, and I'm quite sure one of those notices was on placarding. And I don't know if Mr. Mushroom wants to share his thoughts. Staff's thoughts, once we heard from interested stakeholders, was there really wasn't support to amend that section right now.
Okay.
And so, but yes, ma'am, we did talk about that since you and I spoke.
Yes, ma'am, and I think some of the concern is decals are not issued anymore, and so I think our preference would be for there to be placarding so that we can identify those vehicles in that situation. Mr. McGill can
Thank you.
explain.
Yes, ma'am.
I appreciate hearing that.
Mr. Mustin, why aren't decals, I think I missed that, why aren't decals being issued anymore?
I'm going to let Mr. McGill explain that one.
So I believe that and I'm trying to remember where that change was made, but we have an active vehicle report now. It was whenever the change was made in doing the payments semi-annually to annually, that the process in which ORS has is that those companies pay $50 per vehicle annually, and those vehicles go into an active vehicle report, which is sent out to our inspectors, all of our partners, and airports, so that they're referencing that active vehicle list for every vehicle that is appropriately operating with each company.
But did ORS choose not to do the decals? Because I thought that was one of the methods used to identify for-hire passenger carriers was the decals and then the license plates.
I believe in the statutory changes that were made last year that there was language to put in there of decal sticker. It was an option. They may use decal stickers, but it could be other options available.
Okay.
Chair, do you mind if I ask, and would you ask Mr. Mushroom through this, is this the statute that they're referring to? I have a copy of Act 214 here.
You think it's 214?
I'm just asking, Ms. Purvis, would you please display this? See right here, it says, oh, do I need to make that bigger? Let's see. Thank you, Ms. Purvis. I'm sorry about the look.
It's just talking about the fee.
But I see where, the fee prescribed may be paid semi-annually.
What's the next section?
Okay.
No, go up. Go up to the top of that page. Oh, that's the insurance under 17. I'll look it up. I just I don't know that I picked up on that there weren't decals being issued anymore.
Well,
And this isn't it either, is it, Mr. Mushton, under 1080 right here? Payment of the proper license.
sorry, I can't.
You can't
Why
see
don't you,
it.
why don't you let him, yeah. I don't think that I realized that ORS wasn't issuing a decal anymore.
Well, I think the
And
short
that's
version
not
is.
my purview. That's ORS's purview. I'm not saying that, I just wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, I think when it changed to a permissive we viewed it as, so there's a cost associated with mailing
Correct.
decals to everyone, and the placarding is an easier way to identify those motor vehicles. So I think that was the calculus as to why we no longer did that.
But I thought that when we got the waiver, when our request for a waiver of placarding came in, there was kind of the thought that, well, on limousines and taxis, there ought to be a license plate if they're legit. And there was also a decal that the inspector could see from the front as opposed to the license from the back. But if they're not legit, they're not going to have the license plate. Anyway. Of course, I think more some of the ones that are not legit are going to have the placarding as opposed to some that want to maintain for high-end clients that don't want to be seen that they're in a rented car or something, or a limo or a charter or limo or vehicle. So.
And I think DMV issues a limousine plate, and we get a record of that, so we have that.
Same with taxes.
But you see it only from the back. You don't see it from the front. And that, I'm just saying about what I remember from the inspectors, what they would say as far as identifying vehicles that did not have placarding when we get the request for waivers. That's something we'll work through on the next request, I reckon.
Right, and I think that's where, because of the may aspect of the statute and where we no longer do those decal stickers, that's where it's all the more important to have the placarding on the side of each vehicle. So they have the tag in the back, the placarding on either side, and some vehicles have those plates in the front, but it's not required.
Well,
for
some of the
regulation.
placarding is on the rear window, is it not?
The way the regulation reads, I believe it's on either side.
Yeah, I know what the regulation reads. I'm just saying recalling what I see out in the real world.
Right, and that's where our inspectors are having people adhere to the regulation of on either side.
Okay, thank you, sir. Anything further? Vice Chair Powers.
Thank you. Mr. Mushton, and this is just a question out of curiosity. In any of the application forms, does it require a criminal record be provided?
And I think if it's not in the regulation and it's not in the statute, I don't know that we can add requirements to what they are required to provide.
So there's not one. It's not required now.
Unless it's in the regulations, no.
It's in there is a criminal record for the non-emergency in there.
Right, but that's in the regulation, so
Yeah,
I don't think there would be for if it's not a requirement in the regulation and it's not a statutory requirement, I don't think we can add to that.
Thank you.
Anything further? We will hold the record open for post-hearing comments for a minimum of 5 business days. Mr. Mushton, we appreciate y'all looking at a couple of these areas y'all indicated you would and making that submittal. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, glad to.
Anything further to come before the commission in this proceeding before we close? Thank you all. Thank you for your patience. I know this was a little tedious, but at least we need to get through it, make sure we're all on the same page. But thank you very much, and we will take this matter up at a commission business meeting following the close of the post-hearing comment period. Thank you very much. Everyone have a good day. We are adjourned.